such a big production. I know, I'm feeling a little bit like that, really. So, okay, so this is kind of I just want to set the stage a little bit for this. So this is kind of a methodology. I don't know if it's really a methodology, but sort of principles that I developed over the years of homeschooling. And as we go along, we'll hear more about it. So it's called History is the Hook. And what we do is link all learning together through history. Sarah, come in. So Sarah will be introduced afterwards because she's like. So I love the book. I love Arthur Henry King, who is a professor at BYU for a while, and he wrote this book called Arm the Children, which is a fabulous book about education in general. And I took this quote from him because I felt like this is what I feel like History is the Hook does. What I'm presenting to you is the alternative to the nightmare of history. It is the golden dream that enriches the waking respite. We can communicate with the past. We can live through the grace of the spirits of the past. We very often don't choose to do so. We are often preoccupied with practical things or inferior amusements, but the opportunity is there. And so hopefully this will be how you feel after we're finished with presenting how we do History is the Hook. So let me tell you a little bit about the background of History is the Hook. So I have 2 children, and my oldest read before she was 4. And we were in Texas, and I thought, why would I send her to kindergarten? Because she's already doing everything that they're going to be doing. And so I decided to homeschool her. I read tons of stuff about homeschooling in general, and that was a billion years ago in the Dark Ages, where now you can find lots of stuff. But at that time, there were some key works, but not a whole lot of application even really on it. And so I read a lot of stuff, and we moved to Utah while she was a kindergartner, and then we moved to Kaysville, and I got in this little group of people in my ward. There were 3 or 4 of us who were homeschooling, and a friend and I, who was also homeschooling, went to an art history class. It was a community ed class at Davis High, taught by Kelly Oram, who's a teacher there, does AP Art History there. And it was such a fabulous course, and it was like a 10-week course. And as we took, and the funny thing is, it's only been offered once. And I'm pretty sure that it was offered for me. I'm pretty sure. I've looked and looked again in the community ed stuff, and he's never offered it again. So he offers other stuff, but not that. So as we were taking this, we were driving back and forth and sat in the car one day. We realized as we were talking about it that as we learned about art history chronologically, we're also learning about governments and mathematics, and because the principles of art, right? Science, people, all kinds of things as we learned about the art. And we looked at each other and went, what if we started teaching chronologically? What if we started in the beginning with the Bible, and because that was our base, obviously, and just went through. And so about the same time, I was reading Susan Wise Bauer's The Well-Trained Mind, and also I'd been introduced to Oliver DeMille's Principles of Leadership Education, and so it all kind of just came together. And so we started, and that's sort of where we started. Now, I did not major in history at all. I really didn't like history, I'll just be honest. I really didn't, because when I went to high school, my junior year of high school, where you took the world history class, it was in this huge room. 3 coaches taught it, 3 football coaches taught it. And every day we would go in and we would sit down, and they would put a movie up on the screen, and the boys would fall asleep and the girls would talk. And then every once in a while we had exams, and that was history to me. And I was like, ugh, I didn't like it, right? But as I was taking this art history class, all of a sudden I realized how important and cool history really was. So I was really excited about that. But I don't know, have you guys had that experience?
Was the world history movie Monty Python? It was for us.
No, but wow.
Rasmussen every year.
Yeah, no. Luckily, I did not see that until later, but sadly, I really believe that because it's so sad. Something that's so important is usually, and I know I'm overgeneralizing a lot, but is usually relegated to the coaches and also to really not very much importance in the ACT or other standardized testing, which maybe that's good, I don't know. But it's not really important. What they focus on is English and math, right? But not history, which is the thing that, in my opinion, ties it all together. So we began. and kind of the rest is history. Not really. So let's talk a little bit about what history is. When you think about history, what are some things? I've given you a little jump start here. What do you mostly think about?
Time. When,
Yeah, dates, right? That's exciting. Not so much. What other things? Who, which is a little more exciting. Yeah, I agree. And good things that happen that are created, which is awesome. Scott?
I think just the word history makes you think of a class. And so you're actually in a class learning history instead of, history is not a class, it's a
A thing.
of the past.
It's a study of itself. I mean, it's a study in and of itself. Yeah. Good. So mostly we think of I think when we think of history, mostly we think of dates and we think of maybe what, inventions, we think of where, right? Geography usually goes with history, right? We put those things together. Which, I mean, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's what we usually think of. And who? People. And of those things, what are more interesting than others?
Well, depends what you like.
Well, true. That's true.
The who
In general, yeah, it's the people, right, that really make the difference in the history rather than anything else. However, in my experience of taking history in school, that was never the focus. It was always on the dates and the places, which are not interesting in and of themselves without the people, in my opinion. So the other thing I think, and the reason why I think people are more important is because we look at why things happened if we look at it through people instead of what happened. That's interesting, but more interesting is why it happened, right? And how it happened. That's more interesting than all these other things. And you bring in those things to explain the why and the how, I think. So I'm going to hurry because we're going to, yeah. Okay, so first of all, I think as we're looking at history, one of the things that it teaches us is choices. We can look back in the past and see choices that people make, and we can actually see the consequences of those choices, right? As we look at that, because they're far back, or even not so far back, but still we can see some of the ramifications of choice. Agency and choice are basic things that we're going to talk about when we talk about leadership education. So I think they're fundamental. And so as you look at history, I think that's one of the cool things that history teaches us is agency and choice. Making decisions and how to make the right ones. And looking at some people who made wrong decisions is also a good teacher as well. Okay, so lots of choices. And one of the things that we'll talk about in leadership education is agency. We believe in agency and being able to let children make choices in a safe environment so that they learn how to use their agency and learn how to make wise choices. And they look at other people also making good and bad choices through history and what the ramifications of those choices have been throughout history. So let's see, I've got a little quote here. Viktor Frankl, who's fabulous, said, and he would know, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so even sometimes when we make wrong choices, it still teaches us, doesn't it? And we keep that freedom as we make choices. So I love Frankl. He's awesome. The next one is all subjects have a history. So history becomes then the hook for all the subjects. Can you think of a subject that doesn't have a history? I couldn't either. I've been studying it for a long time. But even like motorcycles, right, have a history. Soccer has a history. Cooking. I mean, any kind of, we think usually of math, English, science. But how about those other things that our kids are interested in? They all have histories. And so if we can get them to come from the place where they are to tap into that history, then all of a sudden those things become a lot more broad. And those subjects really widen, and it's awesome. So, again, lots of different subjects: music, art, science, cooking, DNA. I don't know. Do you like the Pokemon card? That was our little tie-in to history at one point too. When Pokemon was big, you got to use what you have, right? and then you tack it in to what you want them to learn. And so all these things have a history. All right, so good question. Why should we study history? And one of my favorite historians is David McCullough. And I love his books. He's just a beautiful writer, and I've seen him speak, and he's just a really generous and sweet man. He says we ought to read history because it helps to break down the dividers between the disciplines of science, medicine, philosophy, art, music, whatever. It's all part of the human story and ought to be seen as such. You can't understand it unless you see it that way. And when we start learning history chronologically, in the ancient times, they didn't divide the disciplines. There wasn't art and science. They were the same thing, learning. There wasn't math and science even. They were the same thing. And so we need to go back to, I think, we need to go back to trying to put those things back together and connect them. And yes, we need to learn certain disciplines. I'm not saying that, but let's connect them together so that we can get a big picture of what we're learning. So history links all cultures and topics. So it's not just Americans that should learn or can learn history. This approach, the historical approach to education, I think can be used all over the world because every country has a history and it's linked into human history, and it should be. They should be connected together. We separate ourselves, I think, so much from each other. And when we don't have to do that, if we will look at it this way, the whole world, right? I think as we've learned, this year we started with ancient history and then we went on to medieval in the second semester. And usually it will be a whole year of ancient history, but because we wanted to kind of switch over to the January to January model instead of the September to September thing, we just had a half year of ancient history this year and then did the medieval next. It's so interesting that as they learn about Greece and Rome and China and America, ancient America, all of a sudden they start to have connections to those cultures because they know a little bit about them, and they find out that there are some things we do that are the same. There are a lot of things we do too that are different, and that's okay. But we're able to, as we learn about it, then feel that that connection between other cultures, which I think is so necessary in this modern world. We need to have that connection with other cultures. It's global society, you know. We have to be able to understand each other and have connections with each other. So, here are the topics. Now, okay, this goes a little ways back when my kids were young. These were some of the things that we did with that earliest little co-op, mom schoolish thing that we did with history. We built Stonehenge. It was so awesome. It was really fun. And we got a flashlight and we tried to shine it through, you know, for the solstice to see where it would come out and because that's the cool thing with Stonehenge, right, is the scientific stuff. But it also put together archaeology, astronomy, religion, philosophy, art, because it's beautiful, architecture, all of those things just in studying Stonehenge, right? We went, at the time, there was a cool medieval village in southern Idaho that we went up to, and now I think they've moved it down to the Young Living place. I think so, yeah. And I think he does it down there. But we took the kids up there and they, you know, got to obviously joust and, you know, it's very cool. But Middle Ages and studying that time period, there are things like weaponry that are so cool, especially for boys. We did PVC pipe weapons for like, I don't know, years after that. It was awesome. Physical endurance, right? That's really a good thing. Tactics, gallantry. That's my favorite thing in the Middle Ages is chivalry. And we talk about how knights are chivalrous and the code of chivalry and manners, and that's a beautiful thing. And governmental forms, right? The feudal system and how is that different from other governmental forms? So there are a lot of things that you can bring together in one topic, studying one topic, connecting all of these, one subject, connecting all of the topics. And history, I think, is that link, the biggest link. Okay, so we see that it kind of links everything together. How does it do that? First of all, through cultural links. As we learn about different cultures and we learn about history throughout, we're more understanding of other people. We share our culture with theirs and their culture with us, and it's awesome. And that's, I think, a necessary trait in today's world, that we need to do that. Mental links. Do you know that we don't understand our own culture even? And as we learn about our own culture, and other cultures, actually, as we learn about the Greek culture and the Roman culture, we see how much of that is tied to what we do ourselves now, today, for good or for bad sometimes. There's some bad things too. But E.D. Hirsch in his book Cultural Literacy, and I like his ideas. I don't love how they're implemented necessarily. You can find a lot of things by him and his followers, people who do this cultural literacy thing. But his contention is that we need to be able to understand certain things to have a shared culture. And I agree with that. I mean, when the kids were learning about Nike this year, all of a sudden they realized why tennis shoes are called Nikes, right? It's the messenger of the gods. Fast. And if you don't know that, you miss it. You miss that cultural thing. Nike is the messenger of the gods. Yeah. So hello, there we go, right? All of a sudden, when we start learning things that are systemic to our culture, then we understand a lot more about what's going on. Ads, all kinds of things. That modern culture. People think, oh, you don't need to learn history. That's all over and done with. Well, our whole society is built on that. We need to understand it. And that's part of why, the cultural part. Also, Jane Healy